developing positive talks on nuclear disarmament between Russian President Dmitry Medvedev and his US counterpart Barack Obama. The UN Security Council passed a draft resolution calling for reductions in nuclear stockpiles. Well, for more on this and its impact, let's cross live now to Artem Gnazovsky in the Washington studio for us. He's joined by John Isaacs, Executive Director at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. Dina, over to you.
Hi there, Alice. Well, you're right. Barack Obama trying to get the world's leaders on board to reduce nuclear weapons, curb testing, and also put together a stronger inspection system. That was the point of the UN Security Council meeting, and those members did sign on. They do agree with Barack Obama, but, you know, when we talk about this issue, we can't forget about countries like Iran and North Korea. Could they hinder Barack Obama's big goals? Well, joining me to discuss just that, John Isaacs from the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. Thank you so much for being here. We've talked a lot about this particular issue being an all-or-nothing issue. So, yes, you have members of the UN Security Council signing on, saying they agree with Barack Obama. They want to go forward with these plans to reduce nuclear stockpiles. But let's talk about Iran and North Korea. If these two countries don't sign on, are we going to have a situation where nothing will really be achieved?
There are many hurdles ahead. Just because a country's endorsed a resolution, there has to be a lot of implementation. Certainly the Iranians and North Koreans are two key problems. Both have been moving towards nuclear weapons. North Korea has actually tested nuclear bombs a couple times. But the nuclear powers also have a major responsibility. The United States and Russia are negotiating for nuclear reductions. It's taken a number of months. It's going to take more months. They have a long way to go. Both China and the United States have not ratified the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. They endorsed it today. The leaders endorsed it, but they still have to move to ratification. So there's problems with Iran. There are problems with North Korea, but there are problems with all the countries moving from rhetoric to reality.
Well, that's an interesting point because, you know, in this draft resolution, there are no specifics addressing Iran and North Korea. And experts are saying, wait a second, isn't this the whole point then, you know, to address these two countries? You're saying that it's bigger than that?
It's much bigger than that. It's again, a resolution focuses the world's attention on nuclear issues. Having the President of the United States, the President of Russia, the President of France and China speak on the subject is very important. But today is not going to be the day we deal with the problems with Iran, with North Korea, with ratification and completion of treaties. That has to be done through a lot of grinding work, including consideration of sanctions and considering ways to punish countries that violate the norms on producing nuclear weapons. So we weren't going to solve Iran and North Korea in a day.
But, I mean, how close do you think is Iran to an actual nuclear weapon? Because we have to take that into consideration, but also we can't forget about the delivery system. It's one thing to actually have the weapon. It's another thing to actually be able to use it.
Absolutely right. And when the United States announced a missile defense decision last week on which kind of interceptor missiles we deploy in Europe, it was clear that now the U.S. is assessing it'll take many years, at least 5 years before Iran, as you say, both develops a nuclear bomb, and there's no indication they've made that decision yet, and the delivery vehicles, and especially delivering a long-range nuclear weapon from Iran to, say, the United States, it's going to take many years. So we have some time to deal with Iran, and we also have some time to deal with North Korea.
That's right. Now, the U.S. has recently made a lot of news when it comes to missile defense. Right. How much do you think does missile defense have to do with the nuclear issue when we consider the fact that Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, Barack Obama decide that they're not going to go through with plans to deploy that shield in Poland and the Czech Republic?
Well, for better or for worse, the issue of offensive weapons and defensive weapons have always been linked. Perhaps they shouldn't. But the United States and the former Soviet Union developed nuclear weapons missile defenses a long time to deal with the threat of nuclear weapons. And for better or worse, both sides are still dealing with that issue. So I wish it weren't linked. I wish the missile defense system that the United States has deployed in Alaska and California had no relationship to what we're doing with nuclear weapons. What the United States announced on Thursday for deployment in Europe has no connection. But it certainly does politically. It does in the minds of many members of Congress, and it does in the minds probably of Russian leaders as well as American leaders.
Well, speaking of politics, I was watching a lot of the analysis on the mainstream U.S. media last night about Barack Obama's speech, about the decision to chair this meeting to really focus on the nuclear issue, to reduce stockpiles. And the one word that came up a lot was weakness. That Barack Obama came out and he's shown that he's a weak leader because he's either making concessions or making certain decisions that they feel will hinder the safety of the United States. What do you think about that? And could this hurt him politically? All of these decisions, he has a lot on his plate. He really is trying to make the nuclear issue a top priority of his administration. But how is this going to affect him politically here in the United States?
I don't think it'll have a major negative effect. Obviously, the United States is engaged in a major debate right now on health care and economic issues. Those are the issues on which the public is focused, not on nuclear weapons issues. The Republicans will attack.
Why do you think that is? Because it wasn't the case many, many years ago.
Right.
People were glued to their TVs, watching what's going to happen with this nuclear issue. You're absolutely right. It doesn't seem like it is right now. Why is that?
Well, during the Cold War, when the Soviets and the United States pointed many thousands of nuclear weapons at each other, and people really feared that nuclear war could break out at any moment, nuclear war was very high on the radar screens. But ever since the early 1990s, when the Cold War officially ended, when the Soviet Union broke apart, people have been less concerned. Nonetheless, both Russia and the U.S. have many thousands of nuclear weapons, and of course, other countries have nuclear weapons as well. We've already talked about Iran and North Korea moving towards new nuclear weapons, so they're still major threats. But the public has kind of moved on from the nuclear war threat to many other issues. Now, maybe the president's attention on this issue today, there'll be another nuclear summit in April 2010. There's a nuclear nonproliferation treaty review conference in 2010 in May. That may focus people's attention a little bit more, but I think for voters, probably both in Russia and the United States, it's economic issues, healthcare, things that affect their pocketbooks every day that they're most focused on.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see how and if this affects Barack Obama politically. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
I'm going to throw it back to you in Moscow, but we'll be right back here in just an hour, Alice.
Well, that was Artie Dinigozoski there, joined by John Isaacs, the Executive Director at the Centre for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. Many thanks to you.